All right, so today we are looking at the market forces of supply and then demand in any competitive market or a free market economy. The forces of demand and supply that come together to ensure the equilibrium condition where we have the equilibrium price that the commodity will be traded at, and then the equilibrium quantity that will be bought at that particular point. So we'll take a look at demand, then later on we'll take a look at supply. We'll combine them, then we'll look at how competitive prices are determined. Okay, so in this chapter, we will try to answer these questions. The first question is, what factors affect buyers' demand for goods? So what are the factors that will affect the quantity of goods and services that consumers will buy? And then what factors affect seller supply of goods? So what will cause the producer or the seller to either supply more or supply less? And then how do supply and demand come together to determine the price of a good and the quantity sold? And then how do changes in the factors that affect demand or supply affect the market price and quantity of a good? So whenever we have changes in the market conditions, how do they affect the equilibrium price and then the equilibrium quantity? And then how do markets allocate resources just to ensure efficiency? Okay, so these are the questions that we try to answer in this lesson. All right, so let's look at markets and then competition. Basically, when we talk about a market, we are talking about a group of buyers and sellers of a particular commodity. Okay, it's any institution that brings buyers and sellers together. In economics, market is not necessarily the place where we sell goods and services, but any institution at all. That's why we have online markets. You don't see people walking there, but it is a market because it is bringing the buyers and then the sellers of a particular commodity together. Okay, so basically that is what a market is. And then for a competitive market, this is a type of market where we have many buyers and sellers. Okay, we have many buyers and sellers, and because we have many buyers and sellers, the activity of one buyer or one seller, any economic unit, will have no significant effect on the price. We have thousands, millions of buyers and sellers, so the actions of just one buyer or one seller cannot affect the market price. Okay. So when you go to any competitive market, these are some of the characteristics that you can use to determine whether the market is competitive or not. They all sell identical products, so all the goods are exactly the same. Okay, they sell identical products. You are unable to differentiate the product of one seller from the other. And then we have many buyers and sellers. So whenever you see a market where we have many buyers and sellers, it means that that's a competitive market. And because of that, each economic participant is a price taker. Being a price taker means that you have no power over price. You take the price as given by the market. And this price is set by the forces of demand and supply, what Adam Smith called the invisible hand. Okay, so when you go to the market, you go and sell it at the price that the market has determined. If you're a consumer too, you go to the market, you go and buy it at the price that the market has determined. Okay, so these are some, and also there's free entry and exit. If you are a firm in such a market, you can always enter without any restriction, and then you can always leave whenever you feel like you are making losses. Okay, and also in the long run, if you are firm under perfect competitive market, you can only earn normal profits. You cannot make a loss. You cannot make a supernormal profit. Also, so these are some of the characteristics of a competitive market. So we are assuming that the market in which whatever commodity that we'll be talking about will be traded in will be a competitive market. Okay, we have other forms of markets. So you meet all these markets as we progress the opposite of economics. You have monopoly, oligopoly, all those stuffs are there. So, but for this particular lesson, we are assuming that the market is competitive. So let's look at what demand is. Okay, basically, when we talk about demand, we are talking about the various quantities of goods and services that consumers or individuals are willing and able to buy at various prices. Okay, so the demand is not just about the willingness to buy something. If you are willing to buy something and you are unable to buy it, that is not the demand, it's just desire. So your willingness should be backed by the purchasing power, your ability to buy it. Okay, so if you are able to actually buy the commodity, then that is your demand at that particular price over that period of time. And then we have the law of demand. Okay, the law of demand states that holding other things constant, and when prices are high, we expect consumers to buy less. And then when prices are low, we expect consumers to buy more. Okay, and we hold the other things constant or equal, because when we are talking about the law of demand, we are only talking about the relationship between quantity demanded and then the price of the commodity. But the price of a commodity is not the only factor that affects demand. So it's possible that price is changing, but when the other factors are also allowed to change, then we will not be able to actually know the effect of the change in price on the quantity demanded. That's why we hold all those other factors affecting demand constant. So the income of the consumer will be held constant, the taste and preference of the consumer will be held constant, weather will be held constant, and number of buyers will be held, all those things, all the other factors affecting demand will be held constant. So we are able to actually determine the relationship between quantity demanded and the own price of that commodity. Okay, so that's the law of demand. Higher price, lower quantity demanded, lower price, higher quantity demanded. Now, with the representation of demand, we have demand can be represented by a demand schedule. That's a tabular representation of the relationship between price and quantity demanded. We have demand equation. That is the mathematical representation. That one too shows the relationship between price and then the quantity demanded in a mathematical form. And then we have the curve, the demand curve, the graphical representation. It should be noted that all the representations of demand obey the law of demand. Okay, they should all review the inverse or the negative relationship between price and quantity demanded. So let's look at the demand schedule. It's just a table, okay, that is showing the relationship between quantity demanded and then price. So if you look at the table here, the first column is for the prices, and then the second column is for the quantity demanded. When price was 0, quantity demanded was 16. When price increased to 1, the quantity demanded decreased to 14. As price increased from 0 to 6, quantity demanded fell from 16 to 4. So it's obeying the law of demand. As price is increasing, quantity demanded is falling. Okay, so the demand schedule obeys the law of demand. Then the demand curve. Okay, the demand curve. This is just a line connecting all these points. Okay, if you want to draw the demand curve, we take the demand schedule. On the vertical axis, we have the price of the commodity, and then on the horizontal, we have the quantity demanded. So we are just drawing points connecting the prices to the quantity demanded. So when price is 0, quantity demanded is 16. So you make your point here. The dot is here. Then when price is 1, quantity demanded is what? 14. We have that one. So you keep on doing that. When price is 6, quantity demanded was 4. So when you join or when you connect these dots, the line that passes through all these points is what we call the demand curve. So it's giving the pictorial view, the graphical representation of the relationship between price and then quantity demanded. Okay. All right, let me give you an example of a demand equation. We can have something like QD is equal to, generally is of this form, minus BP, okay, minus BP. So this one, to quantity demanded negatively depends on what? On price, okay, negatively depends on price. All right. Let's look at the difference between market demand and the individual demand. When you go to any particular market, here we are assuming competitive market, and we have numerous consumers or individuals purchasing this particular good. Now, assuming we have only 2 consumers in this market. Now, for individual A, now let's use this example. The individuals are Helen and then Ken. Whatever quantity that Helen buys, in the market at a given price is Helen's individual demand. And then whatever Ken buys at the market is Ken's individual demand. But when we combine the demands for these two individuals, then we get the market demand. So basically, the individual demand is the quantity of the goods and services that an individual buys at each price. But then the market demand is talking about the horizontal summation of all the quantities that are demanded by the various individuals in the market at each price. Okay, so if you look at this, the extension of the demand schedule, the prices are still the same from 0 to 6. So when price was 0, Helen was buying 16, Ken was buying 8. So 16 is the individual demand for Helen, 8 is the individual demand for Ken. Okay, but then when we add the two, we get 24, and that is the market demand for this particular commodity. If you come to price 6, Helen was demanding 4 units, Ken 2 units. So these are their various individual demands. Now, when we add the two, we get 6 at the price of 6. So this is the market demand. So basically, you sum up the individual demands to get the market demand. Okay. All right. So now this is the market. The first demand curve was the individual demand curve for Helen. Now this is the market demand curve. When price is 0, remember Helen's demand was 16, but now we are talking about the market demand. So we add Ken's own. So now the demand is what, 24. So 0 will give us 24 units. And then 6, initially Helen's own was 4, but Ken's own 2 was 2. So when we add the 2, we have 6. So 6 will give us what, 6. We'll do it for all the rows, and then you connect the dots. That should give you the market demand for this particular commodity. All right, let's look at demand curve shifters. What will cause the demand curve to shift? Now, we need to understand this difference. Whenever there's a change in price, okay, whenever there's a change in price, it affects quantity demanded. Okay, assuming there's an increase in price because of the law of demand, we have to buy less. Okay, but this one will be moving along the demand curve. Okay, let me see. Let me draw this. We have this as our demand curve, okay, with quantity here and then price here. Now, if price should increase, when price increases, assuming price comes here, this is going to be the new quantity demanded. So you see that an increase in price will actually affect the demand. But here we don't draw any new demand curve. We just move along the old demand curve. Okay. If price should fall, then this is going to be the new quantity. See that there's an increase in quantity demanded. This does not necessitate the drawing of a new demand curve. So we call this movement along the same demand curve. So we call these changes change in quantity demanded. Okay, change in quantity demanded. But it's also possible that the price of the commodity will be constant, but then the other factors that affect demand will rather change. We will call them the non-price determinants of demand. So all the other factors that can affect demand other than the price of the commodity. So when these factors change, then we expect a shift in the demand curve. But whenever there's a change in price, holding the other factors constant, we only move along the initial demand curve. We don't draw any new demand curve. Okay, so let's look at these shifters. Now, the first one is the number of buyers. The number of buyers. Okay, the number of buyers. Just assuming we have an increase in the number of buyers of this commodity, then at the same price, we should expect an increase in demand. Okay, assuming initially the price was 10, and then we had 10 buyers. Each person was buying 1, so the demand there was 10. But now we have 15 buyers. At the same price of 10, we have a demand of what? 15. You see, so the price hasn't changed though, but then there's an increase in the demand. The increase in the quantity of the good that people are buying, all because of the increase in the number of buyers. So whenever there's an increase in the number of buyers, the demand curve will shift to the right. Okay, it shows an increase in demand. Okay, so this is what happens. this is what happens. Initially, this gray line, this gray demand curve was the initial one before the increase in the number of buyers. So when the number of buyers increase, then at the same price, we should expect an increase in the demand. Initially, when price was 6, the market demand was 6. But now, because of the increase in the number of buyers, when price is 6, we have, I think, about 12 units of this commodity that is being bought. So whenever price is held constant, but then there's an increase in the number of buyers, then we see the demand curve shifting to the right. Okay, so this means that if the number of buyers should reduce, if there's a decrease in the number of buyers, then the demand curve will shift to the left. Okay, to shift to it will just work in the opposite direction. Then another demand curve shifter is income. But for this one, we have to be very careful. Okay, we have to be very careful. When you are talking about the effect of changes in income on the demand curve, you need to know the particular good in question. Now, we have to talk about normal goods and then inferior goods. For normal goods, these are goods that are positively related to income. What this means is that whenever there's an increase in the consumer's income, he tends to buy more of that good. So what this means is, if the consumer's income should increase and the good in question is a normal good, then the demand curve will shift to the right. Okay, the good is a normal good. The good is a normal good, and then there's an increase in income, which means you buy more at the existing price. So the demand curve should shift to the right. But if the good is an inferior good, for inferior goods, we buy less whenever there's an increase in income. So with an increase in income and assuming an inferior good, there's going to be a reduction in the quantity of the inferior good that we buy after the increase in income. So the demand curve will shift to the left. Okay, the demand curve is going to shift to the left. These are the two goods that we are talking about, but we can also talk about necessities, the goods that we cannot do without, something like salt, sugar. You can't say that there's an increase in your income, so you'll be buying more sugar or you'll be eating more salt. No, the quantity that you eat is the same quantity that you. So for those ones, the demand curve will not be affected by the changes in income at all. So the demand curve won't change. Okay. But concentrating on the normal and then the inferior goods. For a normal good, whenever income increases, the demand curve will shift to the right. For an inferior good, whenever the consumer's income increases, the demand curve will shift to the left. Okay. All right. Then prices of related goods. This one too, we have to talk about substitutes and then we have to talk about complements. For substitutes, these are goods that serve the same purpose. So it's either you buy one or you buy the other. And you buying one means that you buy more of one means that you are buying less of the other. An example is the pizza and then the hamburgers that they're giving. Rice, gas cooker and electric cooker. Milo and this way. All these goods are substitutes. If you don't use one, you can use the other. Okay. So now just assuming that there's an increase in the price of a substitute. Let's take Milo and this way. You can either buy Milo or buy this way. So if there's an increase in the price of Milo, what is the effect of that on the demand curve for this way? When the price of Milo increases, because this way is a perfect substitute, people will stop buying Milo and then they'll go and buy this way, even though the price of this way hasn't changed. Okay, it hasn't changed, but because of the increase in the price of Milo, which is a substitute of this way, people will stop buying Milo, then they go and buy this way. And what is going to happen to the demand curve for this way? At the same price, the demand curve will shift to the right. Okay, at the same price, the demand curve will shift to the right. Okay, all right. Another example is the desktop computers and then laptops. Okay, you can either use a desktop or you can use a laptop, or CDs and then the music downloads. It's either you buy a CD with a song on it or you just download your own song from the internet. Okay, so all these goods are substitutes. So on the other side, if the price of a substitute should decrease, then people will buy more of that good, which means that they will demand less of the other good. So the demand curve for the other good will rather shift to the left. Okay, to shift to the left. Then for complements, these are goods that are supposed to be consumed together in order to attain a certain level of satisfaction. Okay, so if there's an increase in the price of one, you buy less of that, which means you will need less of the other goods. So let's take an example: car and then fuel. Assuming we only use fuel to power cars, if there's an increase in the price of cars, it means that the quantity demanded for cars will fall. People cannot afford to buy more cars, so the quantity of cars in the economy will be less, which means we wouldn't need much fuel. So we demand less fuel, which will cause the demand curve for fuel to shift to the left. Okay, it's going to shift to the left. So for complements, whenever there's an increase in the price of one, it causes a fall in the demand for the other, and as a result, the demand curve for the other good is going to shift to the left. So look at the example here: computers and then computer softwares. If there's an increase in the price of computers, we cannot buy more computers, and as a result, we wouldn't need much computer software. So the demand for the demand curve for computer software is going to shift to the left. Okay, so these are some of the other examples: college tuition and then textbooks. If there's an increase in the tuition fees, a lot of people won't go to school, and so we wouldn't need much textbooks. Okay, so those are other examples. And then taste. Okay, now if something should happen to this consumer, that will cause the individual to increase his taste for the good. Okay, anything that will cause a positive shift in taste towards a particular good will cause the demand curve to increase. Assuming initially I didn't really like kenkey, so every day I was eating one bowl of kenkey, but now I have a taste for kenkey at the same price that I used to buy the kenkey, because now my taste favors kenkey. I will go in for more kenkey, which means that the demand curve is going to shift to the right, even though there's no change in the price. Okay, even though there's no change in price. And then expectations. Okay, expectations. Whenever consumers expect changes in income, changes in price, it affects their current demand. Okay, the example they gave here was expectations on income. Okay, expectations on income. Now, just assuming that you are an individual and then you expect that in the near future your income is going to increase. If your income is going to increase, then you try to consume more today, because you know that you have an income that is on its way, that is going to cater for whatever expenses that you are making now. So if you expect that your income is going to increase in the future, you increase your demand now. That will cause the demand curve to shift to the right. But if you expect that your income is going to fall, then you'll be very cautious now. You'll be very careful not to consume all the income that you have now. So you rather reduce the demand for the goods. So demand curve will shift to the left. Let's look at prices too. Now you are an individual, okay? You were going to the market to buy something with a price of 5 cedis. Now, when you go to the market, you heard that you were going to buy 10 units, but then when you went to the market, you heard that by a month's time, the price of the good is going to be 20 cedis. So as soon as we heard that, I said that no, then let me buy 20 units. Don't let me buy the 10 units again. So because you are expecting an increase in price, you rather buy more today so that you wouldn't be affected by the increase in price in the future. So that will cause your demand curve for the good now to shift to the right. Okay, but if you expect a reduction in price in the near future, then you rather wait. When they reduce the price, then you buy it, and as a result, your demand now is going to be low, so the demand curve will shift to the left. Okay, so this is how expectations affect the consumers' demand. So this is just a summary of what we have talked about. Okay, just a summary. Okay, now let's look at our first activity on the demand curve. Now we are to draw a demand curve for music downloads. Okay, what happens to this demand curve if the following scenarios should happen? Okay, so what happens to it in each of the following scenarios, and then why is it going to be like that? So the demand curve is for music downloads. Now, the price of iPods falls. Okay, the price of iPods falls. Now, you know that we download the songs onto the iPods. Now, there's a fall in the price of iPods. So, if you see, these two goods are complements, right? We are using them together. So, now let's look at this. If there is a fall in the price of iPods, it means that we'll buy more iPods. So, we need more music downloads. Okay, so even though the price of music downloads haven't changed at all, okay, it hasn't changed, but then there's a fall in a complement good, which is the iPod, and people are buying more iPods, so we need more music downloads. So the demand for music downloads will shift to the right, as you see by this arrow, okay, to shift to the right. Let's look at the second one. The price of music downloads falls. The price of music downloads falls. How does it affect the demand curve? Just know that here we are not talking about a non-price determinant. This is price. The price of the commodity itself has fallen. So here we don't draw any new demand curve. When price falls, we increase the quantity demanded. So there's no change in the demand curve, but then there's a movement along the demand curve. We now buy more of music downloads. Okay. And then for the C, the price of CD falls. Remember, CD and music downloads are substitutes. You can either use CDs or you can use the music downloads. So now, if the price of CDs should fall, we'll now go and buy more CDs and buy less of music downloads. So the demand for music downloads will fall, and that means that the demand curve will shift to the left. Okay, the demand curve for music downloads will shift to the right. There is a fall in the price of CD. People will buy more CDs. So we wouldn't need much music downloads. So the demand for music downloads will fall, and then the demand curve will shift to the left. Okay, the demand curve will shift to the left. All right. Okay, so we are done with demand. Let's look at supply now. When we talk about supply, we are talking about the quantities of goods and services that producers or sellers are willing and able to offer for sale at various prices over a given period of time. So here too, the quantity that the sellers would like to offer for sale is not just about their willingness to sell that quantity, but they should be able to produce and sell it and offer it for sale. Okay, so their willingness here too is backed by the ability to offer that particular quantity for sale. So just like demand, we also have the law of supply, which tells us that there is a positive relationship between price and quantity supplied. Whenever prices are high, the producers will tend to offer more for sale, and then when prices are low, they tend to offer less for sale. Okay, so the law of supply is just the opposite of the law of demand. Here, we rather sell more whenever there's an increase in price, and we sell less when there's a decrease in price. So with the representation of supply, we have the supply schedule, supply curve, and then the supply equation. The schedule is just a tabular representation. The equation is a mathematical representation, and the graph or the curve is a graphical representation. So if you look at the table here, the supply schedule here, when price was 0, they didn't offer anything at all for sale. But as price increased from 0 to 6, you see that the quantity offered for sale has increased from 0 to 18. Okay, so as price increases, they also tend to offer more for sale. Now let's look at the supply curve. So just like we did for demand, you take the schedule and then we are drawing price against quantity supplied. So when price was 0, quantity supplied was 0. So we start from the origin. And then when price was 1, quantity supplied, this is what we have. And up to 6, when price is 6, quantity supplied was 18. So you just connect these dots and then you get your supply curve. Okay, you get your supply curve. Then we also have market supply and then the individual supply. So remember what we said under the market demand and individual demand. For market supply, we are talking about the quantities that an individual seller or producer is offering for sale at a particular price, just an individual. But then the market one is the summation of all the quantities that the various sellers are offering for sale. So let's take these two sellers or producers, Starbucks and then Peace. Now, when price was 0, let's use price 2. When price was 2, the quantity offered for sale by Starbucks was 6. So this 6 is the individual supply for Starbucks. Okay, the individual supply for Starbucks. And then all right, so if you take something like the price, when price was at 5, okay, with a price of 5 for Starbucks, the individual supply was 15, and then for Pete's, the individual supply here was 10. So now, if you want the market supply, it's just a summation of the individual one for Starbucks and then Pete's. So that will give us 25. So it's just like what we did under demand. Okay, we just add. It's just the horizontal summation of the individual supplies, and then we get the market supply. So let's look at the market supply curve. So we just pick this. We pick the price and then the market quantity, and then we draw the price as against the quantity supplied. So when price was 6, quantity supply was 30. When price was 0, the quantities, the market quantity supply was also 0. So you just connect these dots and then you get your market supply curve. All right, so now let's look at the supply curve shifters. So here too, we know that because of the law of supply, whenever there's an increase in price, the producers or the sellers will offer more for sale. And then whenever there's a fall in price, they will offer less for sale, holding all the other things equal, constant. So which other things are we holding equal? Those are the other factors that can affect the quantity that the producers will offer for sale. So we want to look at these other things, the non-price determinants of supply. Whenever those determinants change, we expect a change in supply, and as a result, a shift in the supply curve. Okay, a shift in the supply curve. So first, let's look at input prices. If you are firm, before you can produce any output level, you need to combine the various factors of production, and they come at a cost. So the cost that you pay for combining those factors of production is what we call the input price, the price of the inputs or the factors that you use. So some of these input prices will be wages. That is the price on labor, the price of raw materials, rent, and then all those stuff. So now, assuming that there is a fall in input price, so there's a fall in maybe wage, price of raw materials, and all that, it means that now the firms can produce more, okay, at the same price, okay, at the same market price for the commodity. Now, it has become more profitable for the firms to produce because of the reduction in the input prices, even though the output price hasn't changed, okay, even though the output price hasn't changed. All right, so whenever there is a fall in the price of the input price, holding the output price constant, the producers can now produce more and offer more for sale at each price. So the supply curve is going to shift to the right. Okay, the supply curve is going to shift to the right. So this is what happens. Okay, at each level now they can produce more and offer more for sale. So we will see the supply curve shifting to the right. So that's the first supply shifter. Supply curve shifter, input price. Then we can talk about technology. Okay, technology. Here, technology determines how much inputs are required to produce a unit of output. So it is the method of production. How are you producing your commodities? Now, if you have a cost-saving technological improvement, what this means is that now you can produce more, okay, giving your technology at a lower cost. So if this is the case, then in the same effect, it's like there's a fall in input price, because here, the technology that you are using you have to pay for it. So if now you have an improvement in this technology that is cost saving, then it means that in general terms, there's going to be a reduction in your input price. And that will mean that we can produce more, offer more for sale, and then the supply curve will shift to the right. Okay, the supply curve will shift to the right. Then the number of sellers, holding everything constant. If there's an increase in the number of sellers, then we expect the quantity that they offer for sale, that's the market quantity that they offer for sale, should increase at the same price. So if initially 10 people were selling, each person selling 1 unit, the market supply there will be 10. Now we have 15 people selling, so we should get a market quantity of 15. So the supply curve is going to shift to the right. Okay, and then expectations will also change the quantity that the firms offer for sale. Expectations. Now, one example is the prices of oil, the oil-related products. Okay. Now, whenever we have unrest in the Middle East, that is where those sides are the major producers of oil in the world. So, for example, if you look at what is happening in Ukraine now, because of the war between Ukraine and Russia, the price of fuel has skyrocketed. Okay, and it's going to affect the production process of firms. So now, just assuming that there's a particular firm that uses oil as an input, and then you expect, okay, expect that there's going to be higher oil prices. Now, if you take this fuel stations, whenever they expect that there's going to be an increase in oil prices, they hoard. They do something called hoarding. They hoard. The things are there, but when you go, they'll tell you that they don't have some. So they'll be waiting for the increase in price to actually occur. Then they can sell it and get a higher price. So this is one example of how expectations can affect the supply. Okay. Now, so in general terms, assuming we are not using oil prices, in general terms, if you're a producer and you expect an increase in the price of your commodity in the future, currently you sell less so that you can take advantage of the increase in the price. But then, which will cause the supply curve to shift to the left. But if you expect a fall in price in the future, then you rather sell more today so that you make a higher profit. But when price falls, you cannot make that profit. Okay, so that will mean that the supply curve now is going to shift to the right. Now, this expectation things work if the good in question is not perishable. If you are selling tomatoes and you expect an increase in price like a month from now, you still can't hold your tomatoes. They will go back. So you still have to sell as you are selling now. So this normally applies to commodities that are non-perishable. Okay, that are non-perishable. All right, so this is just a summary of the supply curve shifters, okay, what we just spoke about. Let's look at our active learning tool, activity 2. This is on the supply curve. So draw a supply curve for a tax return preparation software. What happens to it in each of the following scenarios? Retailers cut the price of the software. Okay, so what is going to happen to the supply curve for this tax return preparation software if the retailers cut the price of the software? If they do that, that is a reduction in the price of the good. It doesn't necessitate the drawing of a new supply curve, but then the price falls, so we have to reduce the quantity supplied. This is what we call a decrease in quantity supplied. So there's no shift in the curve, the supply curve at all. But let's look at the second. A technological advance allows the software to be produced at a lower cost. So in other words, there's a reduction in the cost of production. So we can produce more. So at the same price, we see the supply increasing, and as a result, the supply curve is going to shift to the right. And then the last one, professional tax return preparers raise the price of the services they provide. Okay. So what is going to happen here? Now, when they raise the price of the services that they produce, it affects demand. Okay, it affects the demand for the tax preparation software, not the supply curve. We are producing our software, but those that are going to use the software, they have increased the price of whatever service that they provide. So it is going to affect those who are demanding the good, not those who are producing the software. So here, there's no change in the supply curve at all. Okay. All right, now we are bringing the two together. We are bringing supply and demand together. Okay, so this is our normal demand curve, our normal supply curve. So this point here is called the equilibrium point. The equilibrium point is a point where the demand equals supply. So the quantity that the firms are willing to offer for sale, they are willing and able to offer for sale. It's exactly the same as the quantity that the consumers are willing and able to buy. Okay, so at the equilibrium point, the price there is called equilibrium price. And this is the price at which demand equals supply. Okay, and at that point, so here, there's the price. It's $3 is the equilibrium price. And then the equilibrium quantity is the quantity at this particular point, or the quantity traded at the equilibrium price. In this case, is 15. In this case, that is 15. All right, so if you use, this is the graphical representation of the equilibrium. At this point, you get your equilibrium price, your equilibrium quantity. Or if it's in a schedule form, you'll be given the demand schedule and then the supply schedule. So quantity demanded, quantity supplied, and then price. So if you want to find the equilibrium price, you look at the row where quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied, and that's this point. Okay, we have 15, 15. So this is the equilibrium price, and then 15 becomes the equilibrium quantity. Okay, so 15 is the equilibrium quantity here. All right. Now we have equilibrium price and then equilibrium quantity. Okay, but we have a concept called surplus. Okay, that's excess supply. Whenever price is fixed above the equilibrium price, initially the equilibrium price is $3, right? What if now price is $5? Now you see that price is higher now, and as a result, the producers will be willing to offer more for sale. Instead of the 15, they are willing to offer 25 for sale. But the consumers too, now prices are high, so they obey the law of demand. So instead of buying 15, because of the higher price, they will buy less. They are buying 9. So you see that the quantity that the firms or the sellers are selling is now more than what the consumers are buying. So we have a surplus there, okay, excess supply. If you want to calculate the excess supply in the form of quantity, is the supply, the quantity supplied minus the quantity demanded. So 25 minus 9 will give us what? 16. So we have a surplus of what? 16. A surplus of 16. So whenever price is fixed above equilibrium price, we have a surplus. In other words, excess supply. The quantity supplied will be greater than the quantity demanded. If we bring the price from 5 to 4, we'll still have excess supply, because here the producers are selling 20, the consumers are what? Are only buying, I think, 11 or something. So we will still have a surplus there, but then there's a reduction. So as the price is moving towards the equilibrium, there's a reduction in the surplus. Okay, there's a reduction in the surplus. So the price will keep on falling. Okay, initially it was at 5, which is above the equilibrium price. It will come to 4, so it will keep on falling until it gets to the equilibrium price. And at this point, the quantity demanded will be the same as quantity supplied. Then the market will re-equilibrate. So we'll come back to equilibrium. So that's how the competitive market works. Whenever there's a disequilibrium, the market forces will react. And then in the long run, it will come back to equilibrium again. Okay. So whenever prices are above equilibrium price, before we have equilibrium, the price must fall so that we get back to the equilibrium point. Let's look at shortage or excess demand. This one happens when price is set below equilibrium price. When the price is set below equilibrium price, okay. Now, if you look at this, price is 1, it's lower than the equilibrium price of $3. So here at the price of 1, producers will reduce the quantity because there's a reduction in price. So they will only offer 5 for sale instead of the 15. Then consumers too, because of the fall in price, they will buy more. So they will rather buy, I think 21 instead of the 15. So if you want the shortage, is the quantity demanded minus the quantity supplied. So 21 minus 5 is going to give us 16. So the shortage here is going to be 16. So what if price increases to 2? If it increases to 2, though there's a reduction in the shortage, we still have a shortage because demand will still be what? More than supply. So the price will keep on going up until it gets to the equilibrium price of what? $3. And then we'll have equilibrium again. Okay, so when price is set below, it causes shortage, but then the market will react. The price will keep on increasing until it gets to the equilibrium point again. All right, now if you want to analyze changes in the equilibrium, this is what you need to know. First, you need to decide whether the event is causing a shift in supply curve or causing a shift in the demand curve or causing shifts in both. There are cases where there's going to be changes in market incentives. So how does it affect the equilibrium price? That's what we want to look at now. So before you can know this, you need to determine the effect of that event. Is it actually affecting the supply curve? Is it affecting the demand curve? Or is affecting both curves? Okay. Then two, you decide in which direction is the curve shifting. Is the demand or supply curve shifting to the right or is it shifting to the left? Okay, then you use the supply and demand diagram to see how the shift will change equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. So this question is always advisable that you draw the demand and then the supply curves. If you're able to draw them, you should be able to know what is actually happening to price and then quantity demanded. Okay. Price and then the equilibrium quantity. So this is the initial one. We are using the market for hybrid cars. Okay, so this is the initial equilibrium. So P1 is the equilibrium price, Q1 is the equilibrium quantity. So now, what happens if there's a shift in the demand curve? Okay, a shift in the demand curve. What is the event here? Maybe there's an increase in the price of gas. For hybrid cars, they do not use gas. We have cars that use gas. So if there's an increase in the price of gas, because the gas using cars and the hybrid cars are substitutes, if there's an increase in the price of gas, people will stop buying the gas using cars and then they'll buy the hybrid cars, which means that the demand for hybrid cars will increase. So it will shift to the right. So the step one, which curve is being affected? The demand curve. Step two, in which direction is it moving? It's moving to the right. So if you draw the demand and supply curves, this was the initial equilibrium. Because of the shift in the demand curve, this is the new equilibrium. What is happening to equilibrium price? Equilibrium price has increased. What is happening to equilibrium quantity? That one too has increased. So whenever there's a rightward shift in the demand curve, holding supply constant, price will increase, quantity will also increase. Okay. All right. Okay, let's look at the terms for shift and then the movement along a curve. Okay, if you have change in supply will only occur when the price of the commodity is held constant, but then there are changes in the non-price determinants of supply. So just like the supply curve shifters that we looked at, whenever there's a change in the non-price determinant, it causes a change in supply. But if, because of the change in supply, we have to draw a new supply curve. But if there's a change in the price of the good, then we have change in quantity supplied. This one, we don't draw any new supply curve, but then we move along the supply curve. So we should know the difference here. Change in supply occurs when at the same price, there's either an increase or a decrease in the supply of the good, resulting from a change in the non-price determinant of supply. But for change in quantity supplied, all the non-price determinants are held constant, but then the price of the commodity changes. So we have change in quantity supplied. We move along the same supply curve. Then when you go to demand two, change in demand occurs when at the same price, there are changes in the non-price determinant of demand. So for example, income changes, the number of buyers changes, and then maybe taste and preference also change and all that. So that is change in demand. Here we need to draw a new demand curve. But for change in quantity demanded, the price is moving, but the other non-price determinant of demand are held constant. So here, we don't draw any new demand curve. We move along the demand curve. Okay, we move along the demand curve. Let's look at another example. If there's a shift in supply, what is the event here? There's a new technology that reduces the cost of producing hybrid cars. So step one, is it affecting demand or supply? It's affecting supply. There's a reduction in input prices, so we can supply more at the same price. So it affects the supply. Where is the supply curve shifting to? Shifting to the right because there's an increase in supply. So when you combine the supply and then the demand curve, this was the initial price here. Okay, equilibrium price was P1, equilibrium quantity was Q1. Okay, but now because of the increase in supply, you see that price has fallen. Quantity demanded to has rather the equilibrium quantity has increased. Okay, equilibrium quantity has increased. So whenever there's an increase in supply or the supply curve shifts to the right, holding demand constant, price will fall and then quantity will increase. Okay. Now, what if there's a shift in both supply and then the demand curves? So we are combining the two initial events. The price of gas rises and then there's a new technology that reduces production cost. So step one, which curve is shifting? Both curves are shifting. The first one was affecting the demand, then the second one was affecting the supply. In which direction? They both shifted to the right. Okay, to the right. So demand curve has moved from this to this, and then supply curve, demand from D1 to D2, supply curve from S1 to S2. So this was the initial equilibrium, P1 and then Q1. But now there's the new equilibrium. Okay, this is going to be the new equilibrium. So here, we know that definitely Q is going to rise. Okay, equilibrium quantity will increase, but for price, it's ambiguous. We don't know what you see here. There was an increase in price, but what if the change in supply was here? This would have been the new price, which would have been lower than the initial equilibrium. But for quantity will still increase. Okay. What if the supply curve was even here? If we have it here, still price will be lower, and then the quantity will still be higher. Okay. Now, what this means is that if the change in demand is higher than change in supply, price will increase. Okay, if the change in demand, if you look at this case here, okay, the change in demand is higher than the change in supply. That's why the price is increasing. Okay, but what if the change in supply is here? Okay, if the change in supply is here, you see the fall in price. Okay, prices actually going to fall. Please, the initial analysis that I was doing, I was combining it with this one, but it was supposed to be here. Okay, it was supposed to be here. So you, after dealing with this, we see what I was trying to say. Now, if the supply curve should increase like this from here to here, you see the magnitude, then price is going to fall. But then if the supply curve is here, okay, look at the change. It's so small, and then we will have an increase in price. Okay, it's even possible that the supply curve will be somewhere here, and then there will be no change in price at all. So the effect of both supply and demand curve shifting to the right is that we are certain that the equilibrium quantity will increase, but then equilibrium price, we don't know. It will depend on the magnitude of change in the demand and then the supply curves. If the change in demand is more than supply, price will increase. If the change in demand is more than that, if the change in supply is more than that of change in demand, then we'll see a reduction in price. If they change in the same direction, there will be in the same magnitude, by the same magnitude, there will be no change in price at all, but then quantity will still increase. Okay. All right. So this is what I was saying. If the change in supply is more than that of demand, price falls. All right, let's look at this activity. We have to use a three-step method to analyze the effect of each event on the equilibrium price and quantity of music downloads. The first one is a fall in the price of CDs. So the price of CDs has fallen. So we'll buy more, we'll demand more music downloads. So the demand curve, would demand less. The price is it a fall? Okay, there's a fall in the price of CDs. So now we'll buy more CDs and buy less music downloads. So the demand for music downloads is going to what? It's going to fall. So it will shift to the left. When it shifts to the left, there's no change in the supply curve. So this will be the new equilibrium. Price will fall, quantity will also fall. Okay. And then the second one, sellers of music downloads negotiate a reduction in the royalties they must pay for each song that they sell. Okay. Now, the royalties that they pay is seen as an input. So it's an input price. So if there's a reduction in that royalties, then it means that there's a reduction in input price. So the supply curve will increase. So when the supply curve increases, price will fall and then quantity will rise. Then the last one, both event A and B occurs. Both A and B occur. So if it happens like that, for the first, they didn't draw it, but for the first event, there was a reduction in the demand. So the demand curve shifted to the left, and then the second event, supply curve shifted to the right. So how is it actually going to affect the equilibrium price and quantity? Let's draw that. So let's take this to be the initial demand and supply. So these are the equilibrium price and quantity. Then the demand curve shifted to the left, and then the supply curve shifted to the right. Okay, supply curve shifted to the right. So this is going to be the new equilibrium point. Okay, now what is going to happen here is that definitely price will fall. As for price, it will fall. It doesn't matter the magnitudes. But for quantity, whether quantity will increase or decrease depends on the magnitudes of change in the demand and in the supply. If you look at this one, there was a reduction in quantity. What if the supply shifted up to this point? This would have been the new equilibrium, and then equilibrium quantity must have increased. Okay, so as for the quantity, for price, we know price is going to fall, but then for quantity, it's ambiguous. It will depend on the magnitudes of supply and then demand, the changes. Now, if the change in supply is greater than the change in demand, we see an increase in quantity. If the change in demand is more than change in supply, we see a decrease in quantity. If they are the same, then there will be no change in the quantity at all. All right. Now, this is a summary of what we have been doing. Now, the question is that how does price allocate resources? If you remember the 10 principles that we looked at, we said that markets are usually a good way to organize economic activities. Okay. So now, if you go to a market economy, the price will always be adjusting just to make sure that demand and supply are balanced. As we saw, whenever there's a disequilibrium, whether there's the price is above the equilibrium price or the price is below the equilibrium price, the market participants will react. Then price will adjust just to make sure that we have equilibrium again. So because of the movement in price and then the equilibrium prices here, we are able that those prices guide us in whatever economic decisions that we take, so that we know where to actually efficiently allocate the scarce resources that we have. So the price is telling us of the quantity that must be produced to ensure efficiency. So we don't overproduce, we don't underproduce. Okay, we don't underproduce. So this is just a summary of what we have done. In our next video, we'll look at the elasticities, okay, elasticity of demand.